So, quick disclaimer before I get into my latest episode of The Story Behind. This video you're about to watch was made in 2017 before my channel was even a thing. It was originally a video where I talked about Stitch's Great Escape and how it's probably going to close very soon. And it did. However, I focused a lot on the attraction's history. So, with some minor edits to the script and changing the focus of the video from a theory to a history video, I've converted this script that I wrote when I was in middle school to a Story Behind episode. So, I hope you all enjoy. Walt Disney World opened to the public on October 1st, 1971 with the Magic Kingdom, the first out of the 4 iconic Disney parks we know today. The park opened with lots of unique rides and attractions. Some of these attractions still operate to this day, while others have seen massive refurbishments. Today, we're going to shift our focus onto Tomorrowland, which arguably is the best land in the Magic Kingdom. When you walk into Tomorrowland and look to your left, you'll see a small building that as of now is home to absolutely nothing except the People Mover. But what if I told you this little building has been home to 4 different attractions throughout the past 50 years? Its most recent attraction that some of you are probably familiar with was Stitch's Great Escape. This attraction contained animatronics, 4D style effects, and screen elements. While this show may not be anything special, this building was home to some classic Disney attractions, and arguably the scariest ride Disney has ever built. So let's dive right in and learn about the story behind Stitch's Great Escape. Disney's Magic Kingdom opened to the public on October 1st, 1971. This park is truly what sparked the theme park revolution in America, with numerous parks around the world opening soon after Disney World. Magic Kingdom opened with 6 different lands for guests to experience. Main Street, USA would be the entrance of the park, and the first land you would walk down to visit the other lands. The land itself was based on Walt Disney's hometown back in Missouri. When you reach Cinderella's castle, the first land you should enter would be Adventureland, which is the first land on your left. This land would be home to attractions like the Jungle Cruise. After, you would head up into Frontierland, which at the time wasn't home to Big Thunder or Splash Mountain. They had the Riverboat and the Country Bear Jamboree. Next, you would enter Liberty Square, which is home to the legendary Haunted Mansion. After, you would enter the biggest land at the Magic Kingdom, Fantasyland, which was home to attractions like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and It's a Small World. Finally, you would then enter Tomorrowland, which at the time was home to the Tomorrowland Speedway and the first attraction that we are going to be diving into, Flight to the Moon. Flight to the Moon was a show that would take place inside of a massive dome. The attraction would be a close clone of the Rocket to the Moon at Disneyland Park in California, which opened in 1967. Now, similar to the Disneyland version, Flight to the Moon was not ready for guests when the park opened in 1971. The attraction finally opened as a Christmas gift, you could say, on December 24th of that same year. After a brief introduction in a holding area, guests would enter the pre-show room, Mission Control. Here, guests got an inside look into their upcoming flight and met the Director of Operations, Mr. Tom Morrow, which is obviously a play on words of tomorrow. If you ride the Tomorrowland Transit Authority, or as we all call it, the People Mover at Tomorrowland, right after you see the Space Mountain chain lift, you will hear a message from a lady talking about Mr. Tom Morrow needing to get on his flight to the moon. So you know how the People Mover goes through the different attractions of Tomorrowland? Well, this narration is a tribute, you could say, to the original opening year attraction.
Paging Mr. Morrow, Mr. Tom Morrow. Please contact Mr. Johnson in the control tower to confirm your flight to the moon.
This specific narration actually took place after welcoming everyone to Mission Control in Flight to the Moon. Mr. Morrow explained the purpose of Mission Control and introduced the vehicle for the upcoming flight to the moon. Guests that were on Mission Control then headed to the launch pad and their flight vehicle. This section of the attraction hasn't really changed much over the years. If you've ridden one of its predecessors, you are familiar with the layout of this room. A circular space with rows of seats surrounding a recessed center of the room. On the walls were multiple viewing screens as well as one on the ceiling and floor. Once everyone was seated, the flight's captain welcomed everyone. A countdown then began, and then it was launch time. As the craft launched into space, the entire room, including the seats, began to shake with audible force. A few moments later, as the craft exited Earth's atmosphere, the seats changed to simulate the change in gravity. From this point on, the show took over. In addition to meeting one of the astronauts working on the moon's surface and learning how it was possible, guests were treated to a flight over the moon's surface, which they saw from the bottom window of the craft. Later, the craft gets caught in a meteor shower in space. The craft began to shake as sirens blasted, but luckily, everyone is unharmed. Unfortunately, to keep guests from any more danger, it was then time to go back home to Earth. A flight to the moon was a really cool show in its time, but since the attraction opened early, there were many errors on the ride. In fact, there were so many errors that the ride received a massive refurbishment in 1975 to what would be the second and longest running attraction inside this building. Due to all the errors, Flight to the Moon closed at the beginning of 1975 and was redone and replaced with Mission to Mars. The storyline and preface were very similar. The only difference was instead of a flight to the moon, it was just a flight to Mars. Now, both Flight to the Moon and Mission to Mars had no simulation. It was really just a movie you would watch to think you were flying to Mars. Guests would now be launched on a spacecraft into space and then approach the surface of the red planet Mars. Guests would once again first enter a viewing area known as Mission Control, which was modeled after a typical Mission Control Center with chairs and control panels for about 10 seated audio animatronic technicians, whose backs were to the audience as they moved their heads and arms. Facing the audience was the audio animatronic flight director, Mr. Johnson. He would then talk and show film clips to explain how humans had made numerous advances in space travel. After the pre-show, guests would move on and finally board their spacecraft. Inside was the circular theater with screens and the ceiling and floor. During the mission, guests could look at the views from outside the spacecraft from either of those screens. There were also side screens that showed film clips or graphics. Third Officer Collins was the tour guide and discussed the mission as the spacecraft explored space and Mars. Eventually, the ship was damaged, possibly by a volcanic eruption, and the ship had to quickly head back to Earth. The seats in the attraction would simulate the vibrations and G-forces from hyperspace during takeoffs and landings by filling up with compressed air, which was the exact same system used in Flight to the Moon. Finally, the spacecraft landed safely back on Earth, and Officer Collins would then urge guests to return and visit again. As he explained, there's a lot more to see on Mars, which pretty much disses the former attraction. Mission to Mars was a very popular ride, and unlike Flight to the Moon, the attraction was actually reliable. However, in 1993, after 18 years of operation, Mission to Mars closed down for good. You could say a version like this ride still exists in Mission Space, as on the Orange Team, you are going on a mission to Mars, and technically, you circle around the moon, so you are on a flight to the moon. You could say both of these shows are modernized in Mission Space, but that's the closest thing we have to it to this day. At this time, the ride just became outdated, as it was a 1970s ride system in a park that was always changing. However, what would come next would be one of the most controversial additions in Disney Parks history. Back in 1984, Michael Eisner became the new CEO of Disney. For those who don't know, Michael Eisner was one of the most controversial and infamous CEOs of Disney. Some of the decisions he would make in the parks were hated by fans, like turning Journey into Imagination into Journey into Your Imagination, Superstar Limo, and Euro Disneyland as a whole. While some of his additions would become successes later on after he left the company, like Disney's California Adventure, most of his additions would fall flat on their face and are still considered some of the worst additions of all time. In the 90s, he had a teen son who said to his face, "Dad, Disney is lame." Since Disney did not focus on their teen audiences at this time, nor have they ever really focused on that in the past. So Michael Eisner wanted to make an alien attraction, and not just an average space alien, Ridley Scott's Alien. Eisner worked with Imagineers to build a shooting dark ride named Nostromo, where they would take guests on the xenomorph. This idea was scrapped for two reasons. First, it was deemed too frightening for a Disney attraction, and second, the Alien series was rated R. This contradicted a rule that Disney attractions are supposed to be based on either G or PG products. The new Alien Encounter concept we know today was actually in development as early as 1990. It was originally proposed for Disneyland Park for the project Tomorrowland 2055. The attraction was going to replace the Mission to Mars attraction at Disneyland, but would be drastically scaled back, and the Mission to Mars space would end up housing Red Rocket's Pizza Port. The concept would end up moving to the Magic Kingdom for its debut. Around this time, George Lucas, the man who created Star Wars, would join the project, and help further develop the new story. In George's story, XS Tech, which would be the building this attraction would take place in, opened their labs to the public to demonstrate their new technology, with the queue and pre-show taking guests through their labs behind glass, where XS Tech scientists in lab coats and masks were hard at work, recycling many of the animatronic figures from Mission to Mars' Mission Control pre-show. The teleportation demonstration that guests were coming to see would actually be a trap, with XS Tech wanting human guinea pigs to test their destructive capabilities of an alien creature they had captured. After menacing the theater for a few minutes, the alien reveals that it is intelligent and only wants to go home. XS Tech then tries to destroy the testing facility to leave no evidence or survivors, only for the alien to release us from our restraint to escape, while it seeks revenge on our captors. As guests left the show, the sounds of the alien attacking the scientists could be heard in the hallway. This darker version would be toned down for a more comedic approach. Then again, it would be pretty funny if Disney built a ride where aliens are literally trying to kill you at the Magic Kingdom. After Mission to Mars closed, Disney redid the entire Mission to Mars theater and turned the screen into a large stage. They would even add a giant wall covering the stage until the ride began, and would add over-the-shoulder restraints to the regular seats. On June 20th, 1995, after a 2-year-long refurbishment, Disney opened their scariest attraction yet, Extra TERRORestial Alien Encounter. First, guests entered the attraction by way of two individual pre-shows. The first pre-show took place in what would be called the Tomorrowland Interplanetary Convention Center. Displayed on overhead monitors, guests were introduced to XS Tech via small commercials for the company, whose motto was, if something can't be done with XS, then it shouldn't be done at all. Before the pre-show even started, the television monitors described other events taking place at the Tomorrowland Interplanetary Convention Center, including Mission to Mars, History or Hoax. This would be a tribute to the former attraction. After this first small pre-show, you would then enter the second pre-show, hosted by Sir, Simulated Intelligence Robot, an XS robot voiced by Tim Curry. He proceeded to demonstrate the company's practically painless teleportation technology, using a cute little animatronic alien named Skippy. While teleporting Skippy back across the room, Sir paused the process, demonstrating how the technology could be used to suspend subjects in teleportation indefinitely. Skippy was teleported from one containment tube to another, though he appeared disoriented and burnt after the experiment. After this pre-show, guests entered a circular room of seating very similar to that of the attraction's predecessors. Instead of a small display screen in the center of the room's floor, guests saw a large, empty teleportation tube covered by metal. After finding a seat, a shoulder restraint is lowered onto each guest as the lighting is dimmed. Guests are then introduced to a few XS employees who explain that one lucky guest is going to be teleported out of the chamber to another point in the galaxy. In a rush of inspiration, however, the plans change, and instead an XS Tech employee will be teleported to Earth. In order to do this, the signal for this teleportation device must be rerouted through a potentially dangerous and unknown point in the universe. Of course, they decide to continue with it anyway. As the teleportation process completes, it's suddenly very obvious that something has gone wrong. Instead of the employee, a huge winged creature can be seen in the teleportation tube. This giant alien would be nicknamed Clint by Disney employees. The containment system is failing, and amidst the flashing lights and smoke, a crash can be heard as the giant and horrifying creature escapes, leaving a shattered and empty tube right before your eyes. Right after the glass shatters, the power fails, and guests are now left in complete darkness. Soon after, guests would hear a maintenance worker get attacked and feel the alien jumping around the room with air cannons spraying on their shoulders. As the employees work to fix the tube and contain the alien, you feel a hot breath on your neck and the low growl of the creature behind you. Warm water would lightly spray on you to simulate the hot breath, and air cannons would shoot below your feet to feel the creature moving around. Soon, the excess technicians are able to fix the tube and lure the creature back inside where he is contained and destroyed. The attraction opened with very mixed reviews. While some guests praised the attraction as it was the first ever attraction to create sheer terror, most guests despised the attraction since it was the first ever attraction to create sheer terror. Oh god! Since Disney is a family park, Alien Encounter found itself with low ridership only a couple years after opening, which led to high maintenance costs. Even though the attraction had its fans, Alien Encounter was shut down on October 12, 2003. Though the official reasons for the shutdown range from operating costs to maintenance problems, the general and main assumption is that the attraction was just simply too scary for the Magic Kingdom's typically younger guests, which resulted in many complaints. Disney, however, didn't want to completely scrap the attraction since they invested a lot of time and money into the show. So instead of demolishing it, they decided to make a more family-oriented version of this terrifying attraction. One year after Extra TERRORestial Alien Encounter closed, it was replaced with Stitch's Great Escape, where instead of a giant scary alien on the stage, it would be a giant Stitch animatronic from the hit Disney franchise Lilo and Stitch. When the attraction opened to the public in November 2004, it was a hit. Expected by many to be a vastly different experience from their prior attraction, the new ride was very similar in design, using the same pre-show animatronics and theater technologies. Guests entered the Galactic Federation Prison Teleport Center. As the doors opened, guests would enter the first pre-show. The Grand Councilwoman will be shown on the television screens, telling the guests that they will be the guards for the United Galactic Federation. After being taught the basic procedures of guard duties, guests would enter the second pre-show, where they were introduced to Sergeant C4703BK2704-90210, a redressed Sir animatronic. Here, the original Skippy animatronics were reused. However, instead of one being hidden until the teleportation sequence has been completed, both are represented as individual creatures. Following the pre-show, guests were seated in the exact same theater used in each one of the prior 3 attractions, as with its predecessor. Shoulder restraints were once again used both to keep guests in their seats throughout the dark attraction and to simulate the 4D effects. The show begins with Officer Ombit and Ensign Getco helping guests out with the demonstration. The prisoner is then beamed into a chamber with lots of smoke and was revealed to be Experiment 626, who calls himself Stitch. Stitch begins to spit water on the guests and the security cannons begins to misfire. The computer says the power is reducing after each spit. Following the second spit, Stitch laughs and Ombit explains, "I can't believe it, he's shutting down the system." The third spit leads to the screens powering down. The TV screens turn off and smoke effects begin to blast. Loud explosions can be heard as all the lights go out in the chamber, allowing Stitch to escape. Basically, the exact same experience as Alien Encounter. Now in complete darkness, Ombit and Getco tell the guests to stay seated and do not let the prisoner out of their sight, as the recruits go fix the problem. Stitch destroys a cell phone, and he begins to stalk the guests, tickling their heads and jumping on the shoulder restraints. Guests can hear Stitch scurry around the chamber, and soon afterward, Stitch makes a big burp, causing a nasty smell to spray into the chamber. The power comes back on, the laser cannons continue their attempt to bring Stitch down. Again, using the cannon's fatal flaws, he manages to fire the laser cannons into the crowd, as the lights and TV screens in the chamber are turned off now for a second time. Stitch now begins to leap onto the shoulder restraints and terrorize the guest for a second time. He uses his antennas to tickle the guest's head, then he reappears in the teleportation tube and escapes to the Magic Kingdom. Cameras capture him going into Cinderella Castle, where Stitch gets into the castle by claiming to be Prince Charming from Cinderella. Cinderella realizes that Stitch is not her prince and kicks him out of the room. Stitch then licks the camera on the screens, and in the original ending of this attraction, Stitch stalks park guests on Astro Orbiter, with the ending video changing depending on the time of day. The ending was eventually swapped in March of 2005 to the Cinderella Castle ending. The guests are then released from their restraints and would then exit the attraction. The attraction opened on November 16th, 2004. In fact, the park did so much advertising for this attraction, they did an entire theme of the castle, which has also now become one of the most infamous things Disney has ever done to Cinderella Castle. Now, while guests did enjoy it more than Alien Encounter, it still didn't receive great feedback, as guests found the 4D style effects to still be a bit much for a family ride. And the park advertised it as a brand new ride when it was just an updated version of Alien Encounter. The attraction would operate for 15 years until September 2016. Disney would announce that the ride would become seasonal, which is Disney's way of slowly closing a ride for good. During Mickey's Not So Scary, it became a meet and greet called Stitch's Alien Encounter Character Greeting, where you could meet Stitch in the first pre-show room. Then, in the fall of 2017, Disney announced that it would close for good at the beginning of the new year. In December of 2017, the attraction would reopen for the holiday crowds, and then close its doors forever on January 6th, 2018. Guests would flock to Disney World to experience the attraction for the last time, and the ride would close for good on January 7th, 2018.
Want to introduce thank you for 14 fabulous leaders of level 3 and shutting down virtual events. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day. It's tomorrow.
Throughout 2018 and 2019, they would use the first pre-show room and make Stitch's Alien Encounter Character Greeting a year-round thing. The meet and greet would last until the park shut down for COVID in March of 2020. When the park reopened in the summer, the entrance sign was still there, but it would be removed on August 10th, 2020, showing that Stitch's Great Escape would never come back. There were many rumors that the show would be replaced with something themed to Wreck-It Ralph. However, after the COVID-19 pandemic, it seems that those plans were either heavily postponed or completely scrapped. Photos of Stitch's Great Escape have been leaked, and it seems that the entire theater and second pre-show room have been completely demolished, with most of it left to rot. However, the attraction as of now still sits abandoned to this day. Will this attraction ever see a replacement? Who knows. For now, all we can do is respect the history of all 4 of these attractions. From our flight to the moon, to our mission to Mars, to Extra-Terrorestial Alien Encounter, to Stitch's Great Escape. While these attractions entertained and scared us, all we can do now is look towards the future and recognize the story behind this historic theater. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the latest edition of The Story Behind. If you have any suggestions for a coaster, dark ride, or any attraction you want to learn more about, comment down below, and who knows, it could be my next episode. If you're interested in checking out more episodes of The Story Behind, I have a playlist where you can check out every single edition. You can click that in the top right corner. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, then don't forget to subscribe and check out my podcast, On the Hunt, in the description down below. Finally, if you ever need non-copyrighted off-ride footage or POVs, check out my second channel, TPH Productions. As always, this is Hunter from Theme Park Hunting. I'll see you guys later, and follow the thrill.